Well, here we are for round two. I think today's January the 23rd. Yep, January the 23rd of 2012. Again, with two of my favorite old guys, pardon the expression, Carl and Joe.
Yeah, you just got one old guy.
You're not going to say which one it is?
No.
There was some things we talked about last time. One thing, I don't even know what context we mentioned it in, but you, Joe, I think you mentioned Prohibition.
That's right.
Well, I went and bought a book about Prohibition to find out what I didn't know. And the amazing thing to me about Prohibition was the way, and it took many years, maybe 40 or 50 years for it finally to come to fruition and to be ratified as a constitutional amendment. But how did all that happen? I mean, and at the time, it just seems amazing. That was the only that was the only amendment we've ever had that was truly a grassroots effort to start with, excluding slavery, which was a total different kind of ball game. But excluding that was the only that actually that movement actually started in a small town in Ohio.
Well,
so how did all that come about, and what was that like?
On women wanting men to come home.
Women, yeah.
Sure, that's it. And so you had that movement. It was a woman's movement. And you know, dear father, come home with me now. We're talking this steeple strikes 10. And that was the guys were staying up all night and getting drunk, and the women decided we'll put an end to that, and they started doing that, and women couldn't even vote.
Right, that was before women's suffrage.
When it started, so it was a women's movement.
That was a women's movement.
What year was Prohibition?
Ratified in 18 or 19, 1919 or 1919. I think 1919 is when it was finally.
Probably when it became effective.
Right, and then after that they had what they called the Volstead Act, which told the enforcement people how to enforce Prohibition, which it was very unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Very unsuccessful.
Yeah, well, according to which side you were on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That was the thing about it. It criminalized a very large portion. Is it my time to talk, or could you?
Yeah. Just.
Well, I guess I'm the only one who knows about it. I can say whatever I want to.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
But it criminalized the population because ordinary people started doing things they wouldn't have thought of doing before. Farmers and families, and they started making, not only selling and running it. Well, I've got the problem thinking of it. And here it brought about some things that we don't think about. They learned how to build the fastest racing boats and going, because they had to run it from Canada on the Detroit River, and so you had those long, sleek 40-foot racing boats, and they could outrun the feds in them. and then they developed cars, NASCAR cars. That's where they came from.
Yeah. From the bootlegging.
Yeah, because bootleggers have to outrun the feds.
Yeah.
And then so they got to be better drivers, and they had better cars. And they would outrun.
Some of the first NASCAR had really been.
I'm trying to think of the Junior Johnson.
Junior Johnson.
Yeah. Was he a bootlegger?
Yeah.
If he's still alive, he's still in NASCAR, and he started out as a bootlegger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where they got it.
Yeah.
And in what year did they repeal it?
30. No, it was.
Let's see. About 30. They did it by states. See, at first they repealed it, and then you had the state was either dry or wet. They went back to states' rights.
Yeah.
And they decided when they went. So it was according to what year you were in.
Right.
Kansas was dry, but everybody had their bootlegger down in Kansas City. And so we, from the fraternity, well, you just run down, and it was 90 miles, and that didn't take long, and you knew the bootlegger's car, and so everybody had their bootleg. That's my point, is it criminalized the population. Yeah. Everybody was in the alcohol, the illegal alcohol business. Not everybody, but a lot of people that had never done anything out of it. You know, they weren't professional lawbreakers, but this was an opportunity for them to, because you think Germans were going to do without their beer? Yeah. And if they couldn't buy it, they'd just make it, and they did, and they made everything to rot gut from home brewed out rot gut whiskey.
You know, Kentucky has still got, I don't know, maybe Tennessee too, I don't know about that, got dry counties.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Kenny Sneed was the chief of police here in Brownstown, and he told me he went down to a brother-in-law of his wife was from Kentucky, and he went down to visit a brother-in-law of his bootlegger, and he said that Kenny's said his brother-in-law kept saying, "Man, I can't believe I haven't had any business at all today," and everything, and it said that 2 or 3 times, and Kenny said, "Wait a minute." He said, "When I travel, I always put my police hat in the back window of the car. I may not have took it out of the back window." So he went out to the back window, he took and put it down the floorboard, and he said in about 15 minutes, the business started picking up because the hat wasn't in the policeman's hat wasn't.
Well, it fostered all kinds. Jasper Chicago truck line became a big business because it carried whiskey from these hills out around Tunnelton, and you never, if you saw smoke coming up, don't go there because they're making whiskey. And we had stills everywhere, and of course home brew was easy to make. So it criminalized the society, and not only that. Now we come to the bad part. It developed gangs like Al Capone and them, and that got to be really bad.
Yeah.
And then I mean, people got to getting killed.
Right.
And that was a big business, and they just became more powerful all the time.
What was it like around here? I mean, in this community? And the reason I ask, because if I understood it correctly, communion wine was still legal. The churches could still buy communion wine.
Oh yeah, there were.
And that couple, when you mentioned the Lutheran, we have a big Lutheran contingent around here.
Sure we do.
How do you? What was it like around here?
Well,
I mean,
it was like every other. Okay, I'll just say every other place we're making home brew, and the third place was making whiskey. It might have been rot gut, and then they were hauling up with these truck lines. It was just a whole industry, and illegal. And then it got so bad that, you know, if you didn't do it my way, you got shot. And so it was very dangerous. Do you want? Well, and you'd go to a party and they'd have liquor. So it just did not work at all.
Right.
I don't know what you want me to say. I was old enough to. Yeah, I was old enough to. I neither one of us drink, you know. But I don't. And of course, I don't know how much I poured down toilets and in plants and everything else to get rid of drink, because I didn't want to go around being a savior of the population or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, when they offer me a drink, one night in Kansas City, I drank 17 Cokes. We had started out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I think we quit about 4 o'clock in the morning, and going to all the places. You heard 12th Street Rag, 12th Street in Kansas City?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great place for music, and well, I don't know how. Well, I'll tell you about this. That we went to Kansas City a lot, and it was run by a boss named Tom. We're going to get into. I'm going to bury. We got a boss named Tom Pendergrass.
Pendergrass, yeah.
You've heard of him.
He created Harry Truman.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's one reason Harry Truman, that's one of the many reasons that Harry Truman was a godsend at the time he came. Harry Truman showed that you could, not only could, you just, if you were going to do anything, you didn't work with just good people. You had to work with good and bad people. So he ended up, as it should have. Tom Pendergrass went to prison, and Harry Truman and his haberdasher business went to the presidency.
Right.
Because and I went down there and enjoyed great music next to Beale Street in Memphis, to the best music in the world probably, at those joints and the whorehouses on 12th Street, or you go down and that's where they peck on the window with the coins, you know. Yeah. No, I didn't do that either.
Just for the record.
Just for the record, I didn't just drop drink. I didn't go to the whorehouse.
Wait a minute. You told me a story about your...
Well, as an active participant anyway. But the music was great, and Pendergrass' rule was every city, the consequence had a boss.
Right,
And so Tom ran that, and the rule was don't bother the respectables. Now, that was the rule, and they better not.
Right.
Yeah, I can recall in the 50s and 60s in Terre Haute, there was a lot of Syrians, and there was one guy who was over. He was the money man, and if you're Syrian and you wanted to start a business, he would back you and set you up in business. But if you didn't make a success out of it with his help or anything, he was just blackballed.
Why were there Syrians in Terre Haute? What was that all about?
I don't know. They really had, at that time, they owned most of the grocery stores. There's a lot of little grocery stores then.
Yeah.
They owned most of the bars, and it was just about like a mafia. And Joe Maluli was the guy's name, and he was the boss.
Wow.
But you'd go and talk to him if you was wanting to, and they would back you financially.
That's the question. The good and the bad had to get along.
Yeah.
You don't have a community where you just have good people or just have God. You got to get along with the good and the bad people both.
Right.
And you got to know where the boundaries are.
Right.
Now, what was the name of the distributor in Terre Haute? Big. Well, he ended up Hum.
Yeah.
Hum had a big. I think they're good folks.
Oh yeah.
But they had
Holman of like the 500 racetrack.
Oh, he bought the 500 racetrack after the Second World War.
Yeah.
Tony
Holman. Yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, when we used to sell them a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah. They have Clever Girl baking powder. And,
Really? I didn't know that.
And we packed stuff with meal and flour.
Tony swung a lot of weight around Terre Haute.
Yeah. So you see, he had to get along.
Yeah. Right. And if you wanted to be a politician or run for any office, you had to go talk to Tony. And if you convinced him that you didn't matter if Republican or Democrat, and you convinced him that you was sincere and you really wanted to run, he would back your campaign.
So Tony was the boss in Terre Haute at the time.
Well, he wasn't like he did more than that. Tony had a real business.
He was a big grocery distributor, and of all kinds of food and everything.
Yeah.
But there was Mayor Tucker was really the boss in Terre Haute, and I've got off the subject a little bit.
No,
that's fine. No, that's fine.
But I mean, in my lifetime, I can remember where there was a boss,
Carl, what do you remember about you mentioned Harry Truman. We just felt that was a great segue to talk. What do you remember about the presidency of Harry Truman?
Okay, I can remember when Roosevelt died. And I can remember my grandpa was a strong Republican. And he was saying, that damn kid, he can't...
Talking about Truman.
Truman. That damn kid, he can't make it, you know, he can't do anything. And he was just put in there because nobody else wanted to be there and all that and everything. Then he proved he could make decisions and things after that, you know.
Do you remember when the bomb was dropped?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That was a big decision.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that. And
He remembers it after the bomb was dropped.
But yeah, I remember. You know, I'm trying to think. That would have been in
45, I believe. Yeah, when the bomb was dropped.
Yeah, when the bomb was dropped. When did Roosevelt die?
44. No, 45. April of 45.
Was it? Okay.
April of 45.
Yeah.
And then the bomb was dropped in August, I think. Yeah.
And of course, remember Truman and McCarthy got sideways, and that was Truman, wasn't it? Yeah, McCarthy got sideways
when he was doing his witch hunt for the. Am I thinking?
No, what?
When he had the McCarthyism. Was that?
No, that McCarthy.
General MacArthur.
Yes.
General. Oh, yeah. He fired MacArthur.
Yes,
he fired him.
Yeah.
And he should have.
Yeah, and that's when he made Iowa return, you know.
At the Philippines.
The Philippines.
And see,
I remember that. And then I remember MacArthur.
MacArthur,
Yeah. He was out to get all the communists and everything, you know. And there was a lot of people in Hollywood was blackballed because at one time or the other they had to attend some communist meetings.
Yeah. Now that's McCarthy you're talking about. Joe McCarthy.
Joe McCarthy. Yeah. And he strong-armed him pretty hard. Yeah. And then I know I'm not sure how he went out, whether just at the end of his time or what. I don't remember that, but I do remember that. I think.
He got to saying some things that weren't true.
Yeah, the Kennedys. Didn't they go after him?
They went after him. Not as a communist, but as he claimed to be a tail gunner, and he made claims that they were showing up. They were stories. They were lies.
Yeah.
And so that was the end of him for them. But,
yeah, I know they was after him when not Jack, the other one that got shot.
Bobby.
Mm-hmm. Bobby was the Attorney General.
Before.
He got shot in '68, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good warm up. Now here's something that I had on the list, and I want to get into more of this later on because we're going to do some more, right, Joe?
Yeah.
All right.
I
want to talk about
things. I think you had a good list because they are things that are important and they have to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And they are significant.
I'm not trying to be too random, but if we don't have to stick to an agenda, so I'm going to throw. And let's talk about business. You two obviously have been very successful businessmen, and I've delved in. Well, you have as well, Joe. You both have been. You've both been successful and given a lot back to your communities, and you're still doing that. But without me putting thoughts into your head, what does it take? What do you have that a regular guy walking down the street does not have?
Clark can tell you a lot more of that than I do, but if I tell you what he impresses me with, is, or has, the first thing, because he obviously has been very successful. Two things are important in business in mine. I'm saying this.
Yeah.
Two things. Yes, you have to make money, and then you make a difference. You don't
Make a difference.
But you make a difference. And what I heard him say the first time, you got to make people like you. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
He told me that 15 years ago.
Well,
Yes, he did.
Well, you see, it works.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Some days maybe.
Pardon me for jumping in here.
The thing I think is there's a lot of people that's not teachers that can educate people. And I've been around a lot of people that was very successful without an education, such as Earl Hobbs. People I worked at General Electric with that when I was young, they spent a lot of time with me.
Right.
And a guy named Alex Inman told me anytime I wanted to come to his house, I could come to his house, and he really taught me about sales. And Woody English taught me about sales, a guy named George Minnick. And I think that I was old enough at the time I went to work for General Electric, but see, let me think, where was I at in 1961? I was 27.
27.
Yeah. And I'd grown up enough that I was listening, you know. And like I told Joe, that I've had a lot of breaks in my life.
That helps.
Yeah. And people's kind of took me underneath their wing and helped me, and I think you got to have breaks.
But don't you think? Yes, you do. But don't you think we create the opportunities where we can take advantage of those breaks?
I think when I'd been younger, I wouldn't have recognized the breaks.
Maybe it's recognizing the opportunities.
Or that, or I think when it started happening to me, I was mature enough, and Jenny and I just got married, and I was wanting to start a family, and I had Rhonda, and I was really wanting to do good, and I just just so many people helped me. I mean, in sales, and then Earl Hobbs, sometimes he could be a little ornery and everything, but he gave me the break of a lifetime.
Yeah.
He wanted to start a supply company, and we talked about it, and then I had a tumor on the spine and had back surgery, and General Electric paid me for 6 months when all I was doing working the telephone.
Right.
And customers was, phoning orders in and everything, and they paid me a commission, and so when I got where I could get back on the road, Earl said, "Well, you ready to start a new company?" And I said, "I can't do it." And they were so good to me that I can't just leave them. And he said, "Well, we'll just wait until you get ready." And it was about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And due to some people retiring, and General Electric's a big company, and there were some things, and so I told Earl I was ready. And Brownstown Electric was started with not much money. Earl put in $10,000 for him, he put in $10,000 for me.
Now, if you don't mind, I'll tell you, I'll stop you right there.
Okay.
Because the next 2 sessions, I would like to do.
I can't. I spend too much time. I can't keep doing this.
But, well, one more time. But I want to do one more, and I want to hear the history of your business by yourself, just me and you. And I want to do the same with Carl.
Okay. All righty.
I mean, take an hour, and I want to go from start to finish because I think it needs to be documented.
Well,
I think you got a book that pretty much documents it, don't you?
You don't know anybody.
Well, it's not your book.
No, Phil wrote.
Yeah, Phil
No,
wrote.
but I want to hear. I would really like to hear you tell it.
Yeah, but you ought to have a copy of that book too, because it's.
Oh yeah, I'd love to have a copy of it.
Yeah.
But Joe, what if you could sum up what may have made you successful?
I want to add something to his that he's not telling you, and because it's an amazing story, but it's not the only place in Brownstown. John Kiefer without formal well, I'm not saying without education, because they got education, it just came a different way.
Right.
John Kiefer started a whale of a business, Kiefer Paper Mills, and he had maybe 8th grade. Marion Kay, he's 16 years old, he started on the road.
Marion Kay, Bill Summers.
Yeah, Bill Summers, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really good business. And so we have, see, I'm firmly of the opinion that you can do this too, and I think I could cite examples. You can do it two ways. Business schools like Kelly School, they'll teach you how to make money. They'll teach you how to make money. They will. They can do that. And if you're a good student there and do it, and examples are Matt Welch, a cousin of mine, governor of the state. He went to the University of Pennsylvania's business school, and yes, he did well. And I can keep on naming people do it. So you can do it that way, but you can also do like he did. You can get education and you can have innate ability, which I see in these right here in Brownstown. I've seen that happen, and it works. So it can be done either way or some of both. And,
I'll sit down with you sometime and we'll
Yeah.
do the whole thing.
A good friend of mine who owns he's my age and he's built up a fairly successful business. He has told me time and again that you don't have to be real intelligent. You just got to be willing to work really hard.
well, of course, that hasn't been mentioned.
Well, I can remember when.
And I didn't mean any offense by that. I'm just saying it takes a lot of hard work, right?
You have. You guys are gonna. I'm gonna have my own business so I can work when I want to. Yeah, that's 70 hours. That's 70 hours.
When I came to Brownstown and started having success, the people that I knew back from Terre Haute started telling me I was the luckiest guy in the world, and I thought right then, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Because they don't know how hard I'm really working.
Right.
And everything. And I still believe that, it's a commitment. I mean, poor Jenny, she raised 10 girls.
Yeah.
I mean, till they was, up and grown. Because I was gone. I always tried to be home every night, and next day I'd maybe get up at 5 o'clock and drive to the farthest place and then work my way back.
Mm-hmm.
But many times, I was gone before anybody was up, and I came in when the girls was in bed. But weekends I was always at home, but the first 4 years I was out there at that office.
Mm-hmm. Well, something that I've noticed and this is kind of a carryover from last session we had. When FDR became president, they were talking about the same things that our politicians talk about today, and people will protest big business, and somehow in this country it seems like we've come under the impression that big business is only for big business, greedy, corporate, blah, 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 and they've become somewhat of an enemy to the Liberal Party or the Democratic Party. And I don't understand how that developed. Where does that come from, and why does there seem to be such a dividing line?
Well, FDR, we were, I think you can look back and see, whether you liked him or not, we were Providence, as mentioned by our founders, but often, and Providence took over in both his coming in and then Truman's coming in. But FDR started alphabet soup, and I don't know whether you're aware of these programs. And he started with people that were a terrible depression,
right,
worse than you guys can even think about, and so that had to be dealt with. And so you had a number of things with the alphabet soup, and CCC was one of them, Citizens Conservation Corps.
Mm-hmm.
You had a bunch of sloppy-looking guys, no future, no hope, nothing. Well, what we turned around and you turned them into in Besco's backyard with a CC camp there and one in Freetown. Those guys turned into disciplined people with pride and a job and money. They just turned these people around from nothing to something, and they built things that are still here. So that was one. The other one, WPA, was 40-hour week, and
right.
And what?
I had family that worked in WPA.
My grandpa worked in a WPA.
Well, WPA was a great thing, and when business became opposed to actually, it was the NRA, the National Recovery Act, that where they really got against each other, because we'll take Keeper Paper Mill. I know that history, and they had been working 60 hours a week, and when they told John Keeper that he had to go in 40 hours a week and then pay overtime, and the 25 cents an hour was the minimum wage, and so he had to pay 40 hours at 25 cents and pay overtime. That was a big increase in his expenses, and I personally have heard him say he didn't know how he was going to make it. Well, of course, things adjusted, and he did very well with it. But that NRA was when you had a real separation. But you see, they also see this as that's the beginning of when the government tells you how to run your business.
And that's where I run into a problem personally. And that's. But
it worked. It put the people to work, and it was an emergency measure. Maybe it should have been dropped. Because we all know we have way too many government regulated. But that's when and then you had two Roosevelts. See, that's the time when you had regulation. Started to have you did have it, but Teddy Roosevelt didn't monopolies.
Right. Yeah.
He said you can't have
antitrust kind of things.
Antitrust.
Mm-hmm. See, that's just about went away now. I mean, it used to be in my days that if somebody was buying somebody, they would check it out and see. Like Alcoa bought Rome Cable.
Right.
And they said Alcoa was getting too big, and they had to prove it, you know.
You don't hear much of that anymore, do you?
No.
I mean, we work with manufacturers every day that it seems like they're trying to take over the world.
In Reagan, that started going away.
Yeah.
He started loosening up on the restrictions of that, and there was a lot of mergers and buyouts and things at that time.
So that is it's a big thing, and you had the same thing right today in the banking business. We've got other business. We have a sort of a general feeling there, and it's even on the Democrat side. They're too big to fail. Well, Teddy Roosevelt and FDR said, and particularly Teddy said, they're too damn big. We're not going to have it, and so he busted it.
Right.
So that is a real philosophical difference there, and I hope you understand what.
No, I do. Absolutely, I do.
What I'm saying.
I do.
And they have one way they say, oh, we mustn't let them fail. And the other way is they're too damn big anyway. They mustn't be there.
Yeah.
And those are
And
yeah.
And probably see that's you hear they loan the bank all the money and then the banks aren't loaning it to the main streets.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know that any time in the 42 years that we've been in business, has to be 42, isn't it, coming up?
Yeah. May the 1st to be 42.
1st to be 42 years. Mm-hmm. That any kind of regulations ever tied our hands from growing or anything. I guess we've always tried to do it right.
Right.
But I can't think of anything that ever stopped us. We went into other areas and got zoning without ever having any questions. I just can't think of anything that ever really stopped us from doing what we wanted to do.
That's interesting, Joe. Did your business ever run into anything where the government said, "No, you can't do this"?
No, but my business is, of course, everyone is. It's very unique, and I'm very unique. To make money, you borrow money, and he told you about borrowing money.
Yeah.
But maybe because I saw it, I was comfortable during a time when everybody else was not. You understand what I'm doing the depression.
Oh, okay.
So, my grandpa, Virginia's grandpa, was a pretty wealthy fellow. He fed the soldiers he had a feed operation at Fort Riley. He fed the horses and made a lot of money and bought bank stock. And at that time, bank stock carried double indemnity. I don't know whether you know what that is or not, but if you bought $5,000 worth of bank stock to see if it had happened this time, it would solve the problem. You were liable for $10,000 if it went bad.
Yep.
And his did. He had a lot, and so it required more money than he had. And so he had made a lot of money and was a wealthy fellow, but in his old age, of course, maybe he didn't need it then, but I still do. So I never really wanted to borrow any money, and we didn't have to for the limited business, but I couldn't be in business today because I had bought corn at 6 cents a bushel. I saw the elevators paying $6.
Right.
So instead of borrowing $500,000 or whatever, I'd have had to borrow $15 million. Well, I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
And you got a friend that happened to, right?
Yeah. Well, he had to get $20 million.
Yeah. And
he probably never borrowed more than $600,000 or $700,000 before.
Wow.
Well, multiply $6 by 6 cents.
Yep.
And he'd have to come up $1.5 million in the morning. No, I'm not going to live that way.
You remember when the price was going nuts for us, and
well, yeah,
our inventory went over $1 million, and we didn't have anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't add anything, yeah.
So that was something by being comfortable, but the way it worked out, I still we had a very comfortable business. We didn't make a lot of money, but I could go and do as we pleased. Right. And we had, there were good years, but anyway, we got a family business. We got along. Yep. Not just family business, partners. Yeah. Same business. You got to get along. Yeah. And
Bain and Warren is probably a good example of Emmett Bain and Leroy Warren. Yeah. They was 40-some years partners. Yep. In construction and the trailer courts and everything, you know. Right. And they to me was just a good example.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned work. You mentioned work. They did
plenty of that. They did plenty of work. Yeah, they sure did.
I mentioned that. So, but that was the separation point that you asked about. Was it NRA? Nice when we cover that. Yeah. And we have way too many gutters now, but no, I think there's merit in that. Well, here was another thing in the business that I was in, and it was there again good fortune. When I came home from the war, we had 100 businesses a lot like Besco. They were family businesses. We had 100. We had these are good people. Because I got one more rule about mine. The other one is don't fool around with the sons of bitches. I found they take up too much time and too much trouble.
Well, you know, in the 60s when I was getting involved in electrical business, well, in the 50s, but I was, all the time in the 50s I was a lineman. But there was Mr. Kearney. Yeah. The name Kearney. Yeah. You could call him and talk to him.
Now who?
This is the guy that did in electrical business, supplier. Mm-hmm. But you could call him. You know, it really. Right. And Woody English knew him well. You know, and there's so many of them that sold out. Yeah, yeah. And you lost that, you know. I mean, you used to be able to call them and say, I need a shipment the next day. And they'd run it to the airport, you know. Of course, and we talked before about the trucking business being much more reliable than it used to be. And, right. And you got UPS and everything come in. It's a lot easier, but, you know, it's just, you know, in the 15 years that you've been at Brownstown Electric, the company's just no longer there. Oh, yeah, I know. It's amazing.
Can it still be done today? What you two guys have done?
Oh yes.
Can it still be done today?
I think so.
You think so, but there's a doubt in your mind, right?
Yeah, it would take so much more money now.
And Joe mentioned that.
Yeah. That's why I told you.
To do it.
I couldn't.
Because the first, well, you know, our first sales was pretty small, you know, and we was selling right from day one. So we was getting the money back in time to pay the bills. And I don't think Earl ever had to give us any more money. And he put 10,000 and I put 10,000 and I told him, I don't have any 10,000. He said, I'll put it in and you pay me back. And I think it was 4 years later I paid him the 10,000 back. But people almost say that's not true. Now Earl did have some material for his construction company, And we started selling out of that to start with, and I'd go around and they'd say, "What you got?" And I'd tell them what I had, you know, and everything. But it just takes so much more money right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and you know, when you know, I hadn't thought of it, but it would be tough.
Yeah.
Well, it was tough when you were doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, I never thought of it until Woody English pointed out to me, but I had two of the biggest companies in the world said they're going to put me out of business, Westinghouse and GE. And I wasn't smart enough to know that, that they could put me out of business, and they're out of business now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we just went and said, we're going to give you good service.
Yeah.
And, you know, well, you know how a lot of times we're not the low guy.
Right.
But if you're going to give that kind of service, and you know, I always said, you know, we'll always have trucks.
Joe, what do you think of that? We mentioned earlier, Carl, when he hired me, one thing he told me, here's what you told me, I'll never forget it. He said, if you work hard and people like you, you'll be successful.
Oh, you got two big things there.
Yeah.
You got two, and here, and I was, yeah, he's right about brakes too, because what I got to do in my business was do what I wanted to do with my customers, because you'd have a hard time finding anybody that traveled, but any more or better places. And I had these 100 people that were wanting to go places, and I had the same interest and wanted to go. So I was with, they said, well, why? And you couldn't go any place in the world that we didn't have somebody with an interest in it, because forests are everywhere, and processing plants are everywhere, and chemical plants are everywhere. So we had interest, and my wife liked to travel as much as I did, went every place I did. So those were breaks that I had, and these wonderful people that we met.
Did you ever have to travel with any sons of bitches?
Yeah, I cut them out too. We had these Jewish friends, and I don't mean this because I had some good Jewish friends, but boy, we were getting along fine with them, and we were in Canada, getting ready to leave, and they were handling our baggages. There were probably 20 of us, or maybe more, and they had them all stacked, and they were handling it as a bunch. And these two Jewish friends said, "Oh, that won't do. We always handle all of our bags. We handle our bags by ourselves." I said, "Well, yeah, but they've got them all lined up here." And no, we handle ours. Oh, I let them handle their bags themselves. Not with me anymore.
Yeah.
They weren't going to help other people. You know, they're going to be
right.
So, but no, I had lots of Jewish friends too, because they own business.
See, that's building relationships.
Yeah.
What?
That's building relationships.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you know, of course, you didn't know Virginia, but she's like Joe. Everybody liked her.
Well, and after you've been to just name any place, particularly somewhere out of the way, but now you've been to the base of Mount Everest with John, who runs a big business down in Alabama or somewhere. Well, you don't see whether you can get an appointment. And John, I'm in town. I mean, you're in.
Right. Yes, I understand that completely.
But then it went down to 90, it went down to 80, and so we ended up with Georgia Pacific, about 6, now really, and we managed to get that business, the big business, but it just went down from 100 nice family businesses to 6 or 7, and no, I don't think that's good. No, I don't think that's good. I think that 100 is better.
Do you?
Yeah. And then, I had another son of a bitch there too. But also, there were some really good ones there too, like you found in
Yeah.
Well, I got to admit, when I hired in at Brownstown, I didn't. Where I came from, my background was you didn't really care about building relationships. You had a job and that's what you had to do. But when I came to Brownstown and I started seeing all this customer-friendly stuff, I didn't get it at first. But now I do. I get that because you do build relationships and you build friendships as well.
Oh, and they're real.
And they're real friendships, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
And you know, every once in a while, you'll find out there's a personal friendship and then there's a business friendship.
That's probably tough sometimes, isn't it?
It's tough.
Yeah.
And it's tough on the other side too.
Yeah.
For some reason they want to give you the order and they can't give it to you.
Yeah.
And they've been told by somebody else or something.
Oh, yeah.
That you gotta give it to somebody else, or you gotta
Right.
balance it up a little bit more.
Right.
And,
Right.
and everything. But
Well,
I've never lost a friend over it, but I've had a lot of friends that felt bad. And
You know something I've observed, and I've been in those situations, you know, because the way we run our business, if it's something within reason, we're going to do it. Sometimes you can't.
yeah,
And sometimes you got to say, I'm sorry, but what we've done in the past goes a long way toward no harm, no foul. They'll say, I understand, and the next time everything will be
well,
fine.
here's a good example of that. You don't, well, you may not know about the business in Jasper.
you may drink here, would you?
Jasper Corporation.
Didn't drive.
This guy, he started out like you did with nothing, and he built.
You talking about Jasper engines?
What? No, I'm not talking about Jasper, but I know Jasper engine, and I know what you're talking about. I know those people, but it's the Jasper Corporation, and it's plywood. It was a plywood plant, and two Grammersbacher. That's a good name for that. Two things he did that did well for him. He invented the puncture-proof tire. Do you remember back when they came on the?
Yeah.
Well, okay, he had that, and then he also had the contract. Remember when Ford station wagons had a wood side to them?
Oh, the Woodies.
Yeah.
Okay.
He
made that.
Oh,
really?
They manufactured that.
Yeah.
So that got well. When he started his business, and it was an offshoot, he asked me if I would give him credit for 10,000 pounds of glue eggs. Well, not more than $10,000 worth anyway.
Right.
And my rule was anybody gets credit for the first invoice. And so, oh yes, Mr. Grammersbacher, sure, we'll and you know, he passed the word out, don't ever buy any adhesive extender from anybody but Roberts. And that went on for 50 years. I mean,
Because of one little thing you did.
Yeah, and it was, and that was the rule. That was it.
Wow.
He has an interesting story about Cooke that just passed away.
Bill Cooke?
Bill Cooke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That with the McIntyre brothers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know that?
No.
Well,
I'm familiar with Bill Cooke.
It wasn't McIntyre. It was, well, anyway, two brothers worked for me in 1950.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
In 1950, over at Bedford Mill, and they just, that's all they did. They could do about anything. But there was a better opportunity in town. It was General Motors, and Richard was one of them named. Anyway, these two guys, and they then left me for General Motors, which was a better job, and then they started doing, because they could do about anything, they started doing, fixing things and working for people to do any kind of a job. Well, Bill Cooke had no money at that time. I mean, none. And he owed money for going to school, and so he lived next door to them in Bloomington. And so he said, well, you guys make this table for me. And they said, yeah, we'll make it for you. The two of them, and Joe and Richard. Richard was the one, he was the devil. And so they did, and he got ready to, next morning they gave it to him, and he said, well, now how much I owe you? Oh, I said, Cooke, you can't afford us. We'll just give you that. And so from then on, I mean, they're the guys that did all the work for Cooke from then on, and you know, West Baden Hotel.
Yeah.
You know how they remodeled it, like $30 million.
Yeah.
These guys.
Here's an interesting story. That's the guys that redid the Indiana Landmarks, the old Methodist church in Indianapolis.
Oh, I'm sure it could be.
Where my daughter's getting married in March.
Is that right?
I mean, darn.
Now that's it. That's and I wondered how they ever got tied up with a guy like Bill Cooke. Yeah, I could think it's a Brothers. They still call it something Brothers Construction Company.
Yes, and now it's the
grandkids or something, probably.
Yeah.
But that's how they started making a table for Bill Cooke.
Yeah, and they were working for me. And I remember.
And then I think you told me after he started making some buildings, they was kind of giving him a break on price to help him too, wasn't it? Yeah. They was taking him at a low margin to help him get going. And for anybody that's watching this that don't know who Bill Cooke is, you can tell him a story about Bill Cooke. He went to see Rob, and how much did he donate?
$20 million.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of guy he was. And Rob didn't know he was giving that. He just made an appointment to come sing, wasn't it?
Well, he's been there several times. He was there when I was there, and Joe Black, the doctor.
Yeah, I remember Dr. Black.
Bill and Joe were on the. That's another reason I got to cement that relationship. Joe and Bill were on the same board of trustees for Indiana University.
At IU, yeah.
And Bill had given a lot of that. And Bill remembers you because he knows me. I mean, he knows I'm Rob's dad.
Yeah.
And so he's a sharp guy. And he and his wife, they lived in the same house they lived in when they started. He never had a garage till he was 55 years old. Went out and scraped the ice off his car. And
Did he not start that business in his bedroom?
Well, that's what he got the table for.
That's what he got the table
but
for.
He actually started in a convention in Chicago, and that's how Rob got in on the deal. This guy, so he was a good welder, and to make these tubes.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm lost too, but some kind of medical device is what it was.
That's why he made a lot of money on.
Right.
And so he had been at this convention trying to hawk this stuff, and so he had this guy make these things overnight, and they were beautiful, and so he got in with him, and he was from Oregon Health Science University, which is Rob's, where Rob's president, and so he went out and looked into that, and thought they could do some mutual things, and gave $20 million. He's given them some more since then.
Wow.
So things happen.
Yep. You never know, do you? No. You just never know where small opportunities will lead.
Yeah.
Well, we've about killed our time again today.
Mark. I don't know whether I contributed anything.
Yes, you did. Very much so. Absolutely.
But I think again, if anything, you're going to have. Providence needs to be considered, and Providence to me brought in the right people at the right time, and you don't have, nothing is all good or all bad, and that was for Harry Truman. I got to tell you this, he knew what killed people and what, and he could count real good. He said in the haberdashery business, been a captain in the army, and he knew people got killed, and we had already lost 100,000 people clearing the islands to get the atomic
Right.
bomb.
Right.
And that was and he didn't come from a background of where you had all good people or all, but no, he didn't. He was a common man, and he knew common people, and he knew enough. He could add enough to know that you could lose 100,000, and we were going to lose 1 million if we didn't use the bomb. And Oppenheimer was not at all sure that it was a humane thing to do. Groves was committed to it. Joe Robertson didn't know what it was. and neither did anybody else.
Neither did anybody else.
Now we only had 2 because the one that shook Joe Robertson got us down to 2, so we had to get it there. And otherwise, we not only were, you know, we're fighting a bunch of kamikaze guys. They're going to fight to the day.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're going to have to kill them all.
Yes.
One at a time, or do it this way. And yeah, it's going to be 100,000, but it's going to be a lot less than 1 million. You're going to be a lot shorter.
Yep.
And he made the wisest decision anybody could buy it. Well, you know, I just think that's without question. If you lose 100,000 or 1 million, you're going to lose 100,000. And
Right.
And
Yep.
so I think that he did a great job there. And I think if we hadn't had a fellow like Roosevelt, that we're now there again, things like that. Probably you need to do things that have an expiration date on what you're doing.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, and this is for a period of time.
Because a lot of those things still continue.
Oh,
There's millions of people taking advantage of them.
That's right, and they do. They go on. It's hard to get them stopped.
Yeah. When I mean take advantage, I mean in a negative way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you again.